Hello everyone, welcome to another video. Now in today's one we're going to be unboxing or unpackaging something that I found on eBay. This is an untested socket AM4 motherboard. Now usually this model, the A320M HDV, at least that's what it should be, seems to go for around £40–50 at the moment. The price of these AM4 boards has gone right up in the past few months, not sure why, but I found this one for 12. It was listed as untested, a lost and found item, whatever that means. So I thought at that price, I've just got to purchase it and we're going to see if it works, see if there's anything immediately obvious wrong with the board in terms of damage, anything like that. And I just thought we'd test it with a few chips, if it works at all, and basically just see if my risk paid off. So let's get into it, unbox the motherboard and see if my £12 was a wise investment or a terrible one. So let's find out. Quite well packaged. It was funny, the postman yesterday was trying to ram it through the letterbox in the door and it just wasn't going through, so he had to pull it back out and then knock on the door. But if that didn't damage it, then I don't know what will. So here it is, the protective padding on top of the board, quite unorthodox, but if something was, oh well, you know what, on first impressions it actually looks pretty solid. I can't see anything immediately wrong with the board itself. I suppose one benefit of these AM4 sockets or AMD sockets, unlike Intel boards, is that we don't have any sort of physical pins sticking up, so there's nothing really there to get bent or broken. All the connections look good. This doesn't come with a backplate or IO shield, but at this price I really didn't expect it to. It'll probably be another £12 to try and find an IO shield these days. But yeah, I mean, all the ports look fine. I thought that was a bit of a burn on there, but it's just a bit of black dust. It's not even that dusty, to be honest. I'll give you a nice close-up shot if it focuses on there, but as you can see, there's not really any noticeable or notable issues around the back either. Now we don't actually have a sort of back plate part here. Usually you get that black back plate for the heatsink or the CPU cooler to attach to. I've got loads of those spare, so not a big deal. But apart from that, all we can do now is see if this untested board works after all. Let's get into it. We'll put a Ryzen 3 1200 in here first of all, because that should work straight out of the box. That should work with the oldest BIOS that this thing supports. So even if we have to see if that works and then update to see if it supports a later chip afterwards, we'll do that. But let's get the Ryzen 3 1200 in here first and see if it fires up. I paired the Ryzen 3 1200 with two 8GB sticks of DDR4. This way we can see if both RAM slots work too, and the 750 Ti in the system will allow us to check the PCI Express slots functionality. Remember, no specific issue was stated. This was just listed as untested, which a lot of the time I take as meaning broken, but the seller doesn't want the liability. That doesn't mean that some sellers aren't being 100% honest though, because sometimes untested items work just fine. But with this, well, after using a screwdriver to short the power pins, all we could do is wait, and what a wait it was. I've spent far more money on stuff that I assume to be far more broken, that's for sure, but taking a loss is always a loss, regardless of how much you spend. Though, having said that, I did have a pretty good feeling about this A320M board. After another 10 to 20 seconds, and just at the point when I thought maybe it is dead, the system fired up into the BIOS, and sure enough it seemed like it was in fact working. It's not got the latest BIOS installed, but this is no big deal and easily resolvable. I hooked up my main SSD to one port and then to all of the others to test functionality, and then plugged my wireless keyboard and mouse receiver into every available USB port to check that these were working too. I then let the PC boot into Windows and headed straight for the ASRock website, where I discovered that the A320M HDV R4.0 supports pretty much every AM4 chip available. It will work with older Bristol Ridge processors as well, providing we don't perform any BIOS updates. Before downloading the latest BIOS for the newer 5000 series support, I wanted to hook a couple more powerful components up to the board, mainly to test for stability in gaming, I guess. And after replacing my Ryzen 3 1200 with a 3600X and the 750 Ti with a 3060 Ti, I jumped into a few games. While there was certainly a CPU bottleneck, I tried to ignore this as I pressed on with my testing. After an hour or so, the board was still working, so it seems like I found what is perhaps one of the best deals I've ever found. It's always nice to get good CPU and GPU deals, but every other component is of course just as important, and saving money where possible is always nice, especially if you're working to a tight budget. That said, it's a bit of a two-headed snake really, because buying untested can save you money, but if it doesn't work, then you'll end up spending more money on something that does. I then set about updating the BIOS so that this would work with the latest 5000 series CPUs. With this board we have to download the version 7 BIOS first before we can go any later. This involves putting the BIOS file on a USB stick, keeping the USB stick plugged in, and then booting into the BIOS and choosing Instant Flash. Repeat for BIOS version 7 and 7.2. After a reboot I powered down and then swapped the Ryzen 5 for the 5700G, and this would not only test the 5000 series compatibility but the integrated graphics as well. So after a quick iGPU test, I came away satisfied that my cheap motherboard deal was a good one. I'll be using this in a budget build for sure, and keeping it longer term to make sure it doesn't all of a sudden stop working. That's all for this one then. Thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed it, leave a like, leave a dislike if you didn't. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already and you want to, of course, and hopefully I'll see all of you in the next video.